Keto this, keto that. Ketosis is everywhere. It seems like every week there is a new best-selling book or some new prominent figure touting all of the benefits of the ketogenic diet. But what does the science actually have to say when it comes to weight loss? Let's dive in. By now, anyone that is even mildly interested in health has heard about the ketogenic diet. There are proponents everywhere, and they are saying things like carbs are the only things that make you fat, and fat can't make you fat. Saying things like ketones are the body's preferred fuel source, and like medical professionals have it all wrong. All doctors are wrong about saturated fat, and actually you can just eat bacon for every meal. But are these things actually backed up by science, especially because this is a complete 180 from the conventional wisdom? Now, I want to point out, because this is super important, that there is a lot of individual variance between how people are going to react to specific diets. So what works for one person, the diet that works for one person to help them lose weight, might not help you or help someone else. There are a lot of individual variability, and the main thing is that you need to be consistent. So it's important to take into account individual preferences, because if you actually enjoy eating certain foods, you're going to be more likely to stick with them long term, versus if you try a diet and you actually hate all of the foods that you are eating, you are much less likely to stick to that diet long term. And consistency is key. Now, let's get into the actual science, and most of this information is going to be coming from the National Lipid Association. They have a health and lifestyle task force, and what they did was they went through all of the relevant clinical research, and they were looking at the studies that have tested low carbohydrate ketogenic diets with diets that are higher in carbohydrate, and they were specifically looking at things like weight loss, at blood lipid measurements, at blood sugar measurements, and the sustainability. So how people were able to actually stay on the diets, and did they maintain them long term? So most important to our conversation today is, do ketogenic diets increase weight loss? And the answer is surprising. It's actually both yes and no. And so the difference is if you're looking on a short-term basis or on a long-term basis. So when you look at ketogenic diets versus a higher carbohydrate diet, in the short term, you actually can lose more weight. But you need to be asking yourself, where does this weight loss actually come from? And this is where things get pretty interesting. So when people go on a ketogenic diet, they are going to be restricting their carbohydrate intake. And so this is going to decrease what's called your muscle glycogen and your liver glycogen. And you can think of glycogen as just energy stores or human starch. So we have these sugars that they build up in our muscle. We normally use them for energy when we are doing things like exercising or doing any type of physical activity. And so when you are on a ketogenic diet, you are going to have less of this glycogen. You are going to use up your glycogen, and you're not going to be refilling it. And so glycogen actually holds on to water. And so if you have less glycogen, you have less water, which means you have less weight. So a majority of the weight loss initially when people go on ketogenic diets is just losing water weight. And that's not what actually matters. When we're losing weight, we want to be losing fat. We don't care if you just have water fluctuations. That's not necessarily what actually matters. But this is what a lot of people see when they initially go on these more ketogenic, high-fat, low-carb diets, is that they lose a lot of weight very quickly. But they don't realize that a majority of this weight is actually just water weight. So they're just peeing out water weight, and as soon as they go off of this ketogenic diet, or if they eat more carbs, they're going to refill their glycogen, their body's going to hold on to more water, and they're going to regain that weight again. The other thing that you should be concerned about when you're losing weight is that you don't want to lose any lean body mass. You don't want to lose your muscle. And unfortunately, when this task force, when they were looking at the relevant clinical research, they showed that when people were on a carbohydrate restricted diet, they were more likely to lose lean body mass than those that were on a more balanced diet. So this is something that is concerning, that if you are going to be on one of these diets, you may be losing weight, but you might be losing water weight, and then you may be losing more lean body mass than you would if you were on a more balanced diet. But we know that short term isn't really the big deal. We want to know, what do these diets do in the long term? Do they actually help people consistently stay at a lean, have a more lean body mass, have a consistency lower weight, so they're not obese, they're not overweight? So when you look at the long-term studies, they showed that there was really no difference between people that were on a lower carbohydrate ketogenic diet versus people that lost weight from a more higher carbohydrate, more balanced diet. So they worked equally as well in the long term for weight loss specifically. So there's really no advantage to being on this more restrictive diet, because the thing that they did show was that the sustainability, so the people are less likely to stay on these more restrictive diets. So, that's what really matters. We want people to be on these diets long term because it takes a long time to lose weight. And so if you're going to be less likely to stay consistent with the diet, you're going to be less likely to actually maintain your body weight. It doesn't do you any good to lose a bunch of weight over the course of, say, 4 months, but then you can't stay consistent with the diet that you're on, so that you go off of it, and then you're just completely uncontrolled for the next 5 years and you gain all that weight back and some. Because we know that yo-yo dieting doesn't work. And so when you're picking a diet, it's really important. You want to pick something that you can actually stick to and be consistent with. So where does this leave us? There is a ton of individual variability between people. What works for one person with diet might not necessarily work with someone else. You really need to be taking into account individual preferences, because if you enjoy the foods that you're eating, you are going to be more likely to stick to that diet plan in the long term. So I don't recommend that people start off with these ketogenic diets unless it's something that you really enjoy, you like eating these types of foods, and you can continue to maintain a negative caloric balance for the long term. If you are looking to lose weight, I recommend starting. There's a couple of much easier approaches that you can do. So I definitely recommend starting with just basic portion control, which, if you are interested in learning more, I recommend you look up Precision Nutrition, and I'll put a link in the notes down below where you can get their portion control guide, and they make it super, super easy. You can base it off of your hand, so you can easily see how much of these different food groups you should be eating on average per meal, and that can be a very, very easy place to start. Or to get better control over your eating habits, I recommend starting with some type of time-restricted eating schedule for about a 12-hour window, and that's to help you to gain the control over what you are eating and when you are eating it, and it will make it easier for you to make more positive changes in the future. So I hope that this has been helpful. If you guys have any questions about the ketogenic diet or weight loss or anything, please leave them in the comments below. I'd be more than happy to help out. And make sure that you guys are subscribing, make sure that you're following so that you don't miss out on any more of this great content. So again, this is Floyd Meyer reminding you to eat better so that you can do more.